The moment, at first, seemed almost routine. A courtroom, a former president, a judge presiding with the practiced calm of someone who has seen hundreds of cases, thousands of arguments, and more than a few attempts at spectacle. There were no outbursts, no grandstanding, no viral sound bites, at least not at first. But beneath the surface, something fundamental was shifting. Because what happened in that courtroom was not just a legal skirmish, and not just another headline in the endless churn of Trump news. It was a moment when the underlying logic of power, accountability, and the American system itself was exposed, tested, and perhaps, for the first time in a long time, reasserted. The judge's warning to Donald Trump was not a mere procedural note. It was not a technicality. It was, in its own way, a line drawn in the sand. And once you see what that line represents, the entire strategy that has defined Trump's approach to the law, to politics, and to public life begins to look less like strength and more like a gamble that has finally run out of room. Let's step back. For years, Donald Trump has operated on a set of assumptions about how power works in America. That pressure, when applied with enough force, will always produce results. That institutions, courts, Congress, the media, may bluster, may protest, may even threaten, but in the end, they will yield. That the rules are flexible, the boundaries negotiable, and that the spectacle of confrontation is itself a form of leverage. This is the worldview of the deal-maker, not the institutionalist. It is a worldview that prizes the immediate win over the long-term relationship, the headline over the footnote, the reaction over the process. And for a long time, it worked, or at least it appeared to work. Trump's legal and political battles have often played out as a series of standoffs, each resolved, or at least postponed, by escalating the stakes, by daring the other side to blink. But what happened in latest hearing was different. The judge's warning was not just about the specifics of the case. It was about the system itself. It was a reminder that, in the end, the law is not a negotiation. It is not a deal to be struck. It is a structure, a framework, a set of expectations that, when pushed too far, pushes back. The judge's warning was clear. There are limits. There are consequences. And those consequences are not subject to the usual forms of leverage. They are not swayed by tweets, by rallies, by the machinery of outrage. They are, in the end, enforced impersonally, predictably, and, if necessary, harshly. This is the moment when the strategy of escalation meets the reality of institutional endurance. Because institutions, unlike individuals, do not tire. They do not get distracted. They do not seek headlines. They persist. They absorb stress. They adapt. And, when threatened, they reassert their authority in ways that are often quiet but always consequential. The judge's warning was, in this sense, not just a message to Trump. It was a message to the system itself, a signal that the rules still matter, that the boundaries still hold, and that the spectacle of confrontation cannot, in the end, override the slow, grinding logic of accountability. For Trump, this is unfamiliar territory. His entire approach has been built on the assumption that visibility equals control, that if you can dominate the narrative, you can shape the outcome, that if you can keep the spotlight on you, you can bend the process to your will. But the law does not operate in the spotlight. It operates in the shadows, in the routines, in the procedures that are designed precisely to resist the pull of personality and spectacle. The law is, at its core, a system for absorbing and neutralizing the very tactics that Trump has used so effectively elsewhere. This is why the judge's warning matters. It is not just a rebuke. It is a test of the system's ability to enforce its own logic, to maintain its own credibility, and to remind everyone, Trump included, that there are some games you cannot win by changing the rules. Let's look more closely at what happened in that courtroom. The judge, faced with a series of provocations, public statements, procedural delays, legal maneuvers, chose not to escalate in kind. Instead, the response was measured, deliberate, and unmistakably firm. The warning was not a threat, it was a statement of fact. Continued defiance will trigger consequences, and those consequences will not be negotiated. This is the difference between power and authority. Power is the ability to compel. Authority is the ability to command obedience without compulsion. For years, Trump has relied on power, the power of the crowd, the power of the media, the power of disruption. But authority is what the judge asserted in that moment, and authority, once asserted, is very difficult to challenge without risking everything. The warning also exposed a deeper truth about the American system. For all its flaws, for all its vulnerabilities, the system is designed to outlast any one individual, any one crisis, any one moment of drama. The law is slow, but it is relentless. It does not need to win every battle. It only needs to endure. This is the lesson that Trump, and indeed anyone who seeks to challenge the system, must eventually confront. The spectacle may dominate the news cycle, but the system dominates the outcome. The headlines may shout, but the footnotes decide. The judge's warning was, in this sense, a reassertion of the system's quiet power. It was a reminder that the law is not a stage and that the rules are not props. They are the foundation on which everything else rests. But there's another layer to this moment, one that goes beyond Trump, beyond the courtroom, beyond the specifics of the case. The judge's warning is also a test of the system's credibility, because credibility once lost is very difficult to regain. If the system fails to enforce its own rules, if it allows defiance to go unpunished, it sends a signal, not just to Trump, but to everyone, that the rules are optional, that the boundaries are negotiable, and that the spectacle can override the substance. This is the real drama of the moment, not the personalities, not the headlines, not the spectacle, but the test of the system's ability to enforce its own logic, to maintain its own credibility, to remind everyone that the law is not a game.